The central questions are straightforward, but the available record is not yet complete. At what time? Which boats were present? Which boats moved? When did they move? Who was aboard them? When did the Triton begin taking on water? Very important stuff, right? When did all of this happen? What happened between Nolan's last independently corroborated sighting and the 1631 departure of the boat on which Nolan arrived at Horn Island? And this is number one. If the boat was sinking, why was a rescue request? That was a very good question. If the boat was sinking, why was the rescue request canceled? Extremely suspicious. I don't know. That was bizarre. Was he somebody else on the phone with his grandfather while the grandfather was on the phone with Cito? I don't know. And so here's the analytical premises here, or premise, I should say. There remains a material gap in the timeline. The most useful next step is not to force a conclusion, but to identify exactly which events are visually documented, which are reported by witnesses, which are only annotated by secondary sources, and which remain.
The water was calm, the night was warm, and a teenager was missing. Those are the established facts. What happened between those two things, documented, verified, and still not fully explained, is what this video is about. First, there is the timeline gap between Nolan Wells' last independently corroborated sighting and the departure of the boat that carried him to Horn Island. There is a period of time the public record does not cleanly account for. Second, there is the distress call. A rescue request was placed. That rescue request was then canceled. If someone was in danger on the water, the documented question, the one that investigators and the family's legal team have pressed, is simple. Who made that cancellation? And why? Third, there is what happened to the evidence, GPS records, text messages. According to attorneys representing the Wells family, some of that data was deleted, not lost, deleted. And fourth, there is the autopsy. Months after Nolan Wells died, the official autopsy report had still not been publicly released. In a case this contested, that absence is not a small thing. This video is not going to tell you who is responsible. What it will do is separate what is documented, what is disputed, when what remains genuinely unresolved, because in this case, those three categories have been collapsed together online in ways that have made it harder, not easier, to understand what actually happened.
And so that is the final report from the Nolan Wells. So think about that. How often do you see that online? When did you see a report like this? That's why I think that this is so critical. Today, a screenshot becomes a fact, right? That people think it's a fact. A rumor becomes evidence. We can't do that. Somebody circles something in a photograph and suddenly people treat it like, oh my God, this has been proven. And that's why I say I have my idea of what happened, but that's not the gospel that I've been telling people. And so this report says, slow down, let's put everything in order, and here is.
Nolan Wells was a teenager from Mississippi. He was 18 years old. He died in the waters near Horn Island in July. He had been on a boating trip with a group of friends. He did not return home. Those are the foundational facts, confirmed across multiple news outlets, public statements from the family, and filings associated with the subsequent legal and investigative processes. What is documented beyond that becomes more layered. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department determined the death was accidental, a drowning. The family, represented by civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump, disputed that conclusion almost immediately. They retained independent investigators. They began pursuing records through legal channels. And when those records were not forthcoming, they began filing for them. The retrieval of GPS data from the boats involved, and the question of why certain text messages appeared to have been deleted, became central to the family's argument that the official account was incomplete.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, look, and by the way, just so you know, I was speaking to a family member, and the family member says that this person does not know Nolan, especially in the way that he's portraying. He's not a family friend. And so that's all. That's what the family is. Someone.
It is important to be precise here. The deletion of data does not, by itself, prove anything about what happened to Nolan Wells. It is, however, documented that the family's legal team raised this concern on the record. It is documented that they characterized the absence of that data as significant. and it is documented that they were not satisfied with the explanations they received. Now, here is the piece of this case that receives far less attention than the theories circulating online, and it is worth sitting with carefully. The distress call. According to publicly available information reported by multiple outlets covering the case, a call requesting rescue assistance was placed during the period when Nolan Wells was in the water. That call was subsequently canceled. Who placed the cancellation, under what circumstances, and what was communicated to emergency services in that moment? Those questions have not been fully answered in the public record. A former prosecutor who discussed this case on the Don Lemon Show put it this way, without attributing certainty to any particular person. The lack of transparency from the Jackson County Sheriff's Department was not just frustrating. It was, in their professional assessment, bordering on negligence. Not criminal negligence, as they were careful to clarify, but procedural negligence. The kind that creates a vacuum, and vacuums in high-profile cases do not stay empty. They fill up with speculation, with theory, with accusations that have not been tested by any legal process. That is not a defense of any individual involved. It is a documented consequence of how the investigation was handled publicly.
Now, I know that, you get all kinds on the internet. And I think you realize that. You get all kinds on the internet. But I have not personally heard or seen anyone, especially in legitimate media, legitimate streamers, legitimate independent media, independent journalists, accuse these young men of murder, of unaliving him. They're saying it's suspicious. They don't know what's going on. Even people who are, who claim that they're friends with the family, they say they think something is suspicious and something happened. But I haven't heard anyone flat out say any of those terms.
Agreed.
Before people continue spreading accusations that have targeted innocent young adults. Now, we don't know. I say innocent until proven guilty, but we don't know who's innocent and who's guilty. So the fact that she's saying targeted innocent young adults, she's already been judge and jury about it. They should consider the credibility of the person who manufactured the audio and started this latest wave of online harassment. Okay, she says, as usual, I come with receipts. I'm just reading this as someone who's really not that familiar with it. I did my research before, but I can't quite understand why someone would be so interested, invested in this, and also invested in defending people that you just don't know. You can have your feeling about it. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's accidental. I don't know if there's foul play. I have no idea. So I'm not going to defend anyone, except I'm going to defend the mother who wants answers, of course, which is what this person should be doing. I'm going to defend the right to find those answers, to make sure that the decedent or the person who has died gets justice, or gets, at least their family knows. Yeah, of course. I'm not going to blame the victim.
Yeah.
Nolan Wells is a victim here. Whether Nolan Wells drowned or whatever happened, if something happened to them, somebody caused his death or something caused his death, he's still the victim here. He's the one that didn't go home to his parents. And his parents and the American people deserve.
Here is where we need to pause, because this is the midpoint of this story, and it is the point where the documented record and the popular narrative diverge most sharply. Online, this case has been characterized in extremely specific terms. Names have been circulated. Accusations have been made against specific individuals. Audio purporting to contain voices from the distress call has been enhanced, shared, and interpreted, with some claiming to hear phrases that implicated people by name. A professional audio engineer, Janetta Brantley, publicly released her analysis of that audio. She was careful, on record and on camera, to frame her work as her professional interpretation, not as definitive fact. She explicitly said she did not want her analysis run through AI enhancement because she wanted the process to be as transparent as possible. She invited listeners to hear the audio for themselves. She said directly that her reading was not the gospel. What followed was not a measured public discussion. She received threats.
After I released it, I honestly didn't think it was going to go as far and viral as it did, but not even 24, 32 hours later, I start receiving an influx of messages, and they were from people just kind of giving me a heads up, like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but there's a lady online who's trying to defame you. She's trying to slander you. She's posting mugshots and she's, going above and beyond to try and discredit you and your profession. And with those messages came screenshots. I'm not following her, but I was seeing everything because like I said, the messages were coming in left and right. And then when I clicked on them, I could literally see a woman by the name of Sarah J. Fields. She literally put all of my information out there, including my wife and I's business. And that was her way of trying to expose me, I should say. None of what she said was accurate, which is what made it funny to me. And so I addressed it then. I made a post addressing it, like I'm only going to address this one time because I feel like it's irrelevant. Like my past, my background, which is that was 20 years old, has nothing to do with who I am today and my profession, nor does it discredit me as an audio engineer. So I did make a post, addressing that, letting it be known that, I see it to everybody that was reaching out to me, but it's irrelevant. This is what it is, and this is what we should be focused on. And ever since, the attacks from her have been consistent and nonstop. It's like every time I or my wife Ashley makes a post, I'm not sure if it's her or it's people that's on her team, but they're screenshotting it, they're sending it to her, and then she's making further posts about it. And with that has come threats, doxing, misinformation, lies, like we're operating this business illegally, or I'm not a certified licensed audio engineer. Mind you, you don't need a license to be an audio engineer, but it's things like that that's further building up, and it's like inciting and making the hate and racist attacks that we're receiving even worse. And
Mm-hmm.
that led to the call, like a screen grab of a conversation that was being had that was sent to us.
Her personal and business information was published online without her consent. She was accused of fabricating the audio. None of those accusations have been substantiated, and none of them engage with the actual question she raised, which was simply listen carefully and tell me what you hear.
Well, it's you said it's almost as if she ignored. She did ignore because I just played what you said. You said, and then before that though, which I didn't play because I think that your video is like 5 minutes long, is that you explained exactly what you did, and you
Correct.
said you didn't want it to go through AI because you wanted it to be as natural as possible. And then
Correct.
you explained it, and then you said, but I want you to know this is not fact. I'm paraphrasing here. This is not fact, and this is my interpretation, right?
Correct.
And then, as I understand, you went back and you put it back. You uploaded another video, posted another video without the words on it, right? So because you did not want to influence people, you said, okay. And then, but also in that, you said, I want you to listen for yourself. Listen in
Yes.
headphones. You tell me. So that's why I don't understand this. And then going into your business and your
That is a different thing from a verdict. The gap between those two things, between raising a documented question and declaring an answer, is where this case has become most distorted.
Mhm. Okay, so it says, meet Janetta Brantley, the self-proclaimed audio engineer who took a raw boat distress call and enhanced it until people started hearing phrases like, you killed him and Nolan, wake up. So when she's saying here that you enhanced it until people started hearing phrases, to me, in my opinion, this sounds like someone who is saying that you are making things up, that you are somehow doctoring this to make people hear that. She said the raw boat distress call and enhanced in quotes, until people started hearing phrases like, okay, we know what the insinuation is for there, again, in my opinion. She also repeatedly accused Nolan Wells' friends of unaliving him, and his publicly called for their arrests. Did you do that?
I did not.
Okay, her self-edited audio has now taken the internet by storm and has essentially become a dog whistle for people who were already targeting and harassing Nolan's young friends. So everything that's happening around these children around these teenagers, young men. She's trying to blame you on all of the things that's happening to them, maybe threats and all of that.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Um, So, and then she goes on, she starts talking about your wife and she starts doing this. Okay. And so this is someone who has a history of doing this, I would imagine. Again, I've never heard of this person. I haven't heard a lot of these far right wing people. I have to be honest with you, Netta, until I started doing streaming and I started realizing, like, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I started realizing who some of these people are, and I can't believe that people take them seriously. So this happened. And then the next thing, I think there's a next screen here, right? First of all, before we go to the next thing, what do you think about what she said there?
I don't know. I wasn't expecting it. And so I didn't know how to feel about it. I just thought it was strange how just somebody that I don't know would come out of nowhere trying to accuse me of doing things that I hadn't done. Like nowhere in that video when I put out that audio did I blame anyone? Nowhere in that video did I admit to doctoring anything. Like I gave my professional opinion. I said who I am, what I did, how I did it, why I chose not to go the AI route, and basically was communicating that there's some concern here with what I heard. Now, understanding that, my interpretation isn't facts. This is what I heard. I want you to listen and be the judge. That her post completely, it's almost like she tried to void what I said and created her own narrative. And I didn't think that her creating her own narrative would go as far as it's gone to incite the type of threats and hate that I've been receiving.
Here is a question the documented record does not resolve, and it is worth putting directly to you. The canceled rescue call is the single most concrete anomaly in the public timeline of this case. It is verifiable. It is documented. And yet it has received less sustained analytical attention than the enhanced audio, which is interpretive, or the racial dynamics of the case, which are real but broader than any single incident. Why? Is it because the rescue call is harder to dramatize? Is it because it requires engagement with maritime emergency protocols that most people covering this case online are not familiar with? Or is it because the documented anomalies in this case have been largely overshadowed by content that is more emotionally immediate, more shareable, and harder to verify? That is a genuine question, not a rhetorical one. The comments section on this video is the right place to bring your read on it. There is another dimension of this case that has been consistently underreported, and it connects directly to the questions of transparency that prosecutors and investigators have been criticized for avoiding. Benjamin Crump's legal team, according to reporting on the case, was given limited access to the investigative process. The theory, as explained by legal analysts covering the case, is that investigators feared information shared with the family's attorneys would become public, creating pressure on the investigation. Their response was to limit the information flow. The consequence of that decision, whatever its intent, was that Nolan Wells' family was receiving less information about their son's death through official channels than they were seeing speculated about on social media. That is a documented reality of how this investigation unfolded. And it matters because the family's attorneys were then compelled to pursue records independently through subpoenas, through legal filings, through public statements, which in turn fueled more public attention, which in turn fueled more speculation, which in turn fueled more threats against more people. The investigators' caution, whether well-intentioned or not, did not reduce the noise around this case. It amplified it.
This is starting to feel like it is the intentional neglect of the prosecutors in Jackson County. And hear me out when I say this. I am not suggesting that they are inviting these people to be a part of witness tampering and threatening witnesses or anything of that nature. But what I am suggesting as a former prosecutor is that they understand very clearly that the lack of transparency and information that we have gotten has only led to greater speculation that has given room for these sorts of things.
Charles, not to cut you off, the mic is great. you are reading my mind. You have been saying you're saying what I've been saying this entire time, that they need to be more transparent. They need a cadence of public, of alerting the public. They need to be knocking down some of these things,
Right.
because
That's right.
whether they realize it or not, we're in a different media environment, and they are, through, I don't know, maybe unknowingly, I don't know, just unaware, that they are fueling some of this. Thank you for
They
saying this.
realize it.
Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no. They, at this point, they realize it. Like, you know, you can say, well, Jackson County doesn't necessarily handle a ton of high profile cases, and you might be right. But at this point, when you don't necessarily have clarity around where your, or when you plan to release your autopsy report, when you don't have clarity around how you are, when you are preparing to go in front of the grand jury, when you don't have clarity around a number of different things that are circulating in the public view, you are inviting this type of tampering from the outside. And so I'm stopping short of saying that they are complicit, Don. But what I am suggesting is that they are very much so towing the line of actual negligence because of their lack of transparency. And I'm someone who has repeatedly on social media called for respect for this process, to say, look, let's not jump to conclusions. Let's wait until we have the information so that we can do this without assuming that certain things are in play when they're not, or they don't, where we don't know that they are. But it's getting harder and harder and harder for me, even as someone who has respect for the integrity of the process and understands the job that prosecutors have to do, to make that sort of call with the absence of transparency.
There is one more thread to follow before we close, and it connects to something broader than this single case. Mississippi has a specific and documented history with the deaths of young black people and the investigations that followed, or in many cases, did not follow. That history is not mythology. It is documented in court records, in federal investigations, in the findings of civil rights commissions. When people raise that history in the context of Nolan Wells' death, they are not inventing a framework. They are applying one that has repeatedly proven accurate. That does not mean the framework explains every element of this specific case. What it does mean is that skepticism of the official account in a state with this record is not unreasonable. It is, in fact, historically grounded. Acknowledging that is not the same as declaring a verdict. It is being honest about context. What we actually know is this. Nolan Wells was 18 years old when he died in the water near Horn Island in the summer of 2026. A rescue call was placed and then canceled. The official determination was accidental drowning. The family disputed that determination. Evidence that could have clarified the timeline appears to have been deleted or was unavailable. The autopsy results were not released publicly for an extended period. The investigation has been characterized by a former prosecutor as insufficiently transparent, and the online environment around this case has produced harassment, threats, and the spread of unverified claims that have attached to real people without legal finding.
And, you know, who they decide to do interviews with, is it making them seem like MAGA? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think that, yeah, short answer is yes, but I think the deeper answer is this is a deliberate signal that they're sending, that anybody who wants to even question our innocence, we're going to come at you with frivolous litigation. We're going to make your life a living hell. A lot of this is intimidation. This is what Trump did with E. Jean Carroll, and why people commend her for fighting so valiantly against his billions of dollars. And I think the other point I want to make here is, this is an example of what we mean when we talk about something as simple as due process of law, right? Whatever happened, these kids, these young people deserve due process of law. I can say that unequivocally. Yes. The point is that MAGA understands that. They're upset that these white kids are being implicated in what could be a murder without a full trial, without a full hearing. They get how problematic that is, but they don't want to afford that basic courtesy to the black teen killed in Austin with police showing up and shooting him dead. They don't want to extend that courtesy to the undocumented immigrant or potentially undocumented immigrant in an immigration hearing trying to do things right. They don't want to extend that same courtesy to the children locked up in these ICE concentration camps. And so I think the biggest thing that something like this shows is that these folks understand the danger of a government coming down hard, or public opinion coming down hard on people when they haven't been convicted of anything, but they only want it for people who have the complexion for protection, and that's the problem here.
Mm.
What we do not know, and what no amount of audio enhancement theory or online debate has resolved, is what happened in that gap in the timeline. That gap is still there.
Hold your horses, because we're going to talk about that. Gossip, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, but if you do, go ahead. Go ahead.
In 30 seconds. No, I appreciate you, Charles. Don, I think you guys get it right. I mean, this is why these conversations are so critical. There's a lack of trust in national media. Only 20% of people trust national media, and local media is gone. So these kinds of independent voices are so critical. And having these conversations to push the Overton window and just be a place of balance. I think that's how we're approaching this conversation. How do we balance this to a place not of clickbait, not of being bombastic, but to get to a place of solution and how to think about these things.
And until the documented record fills it, every confident declaration about what it contains is something other than fact.
Well, I'm sorry for that. And look, no one should receive that, no matter how you feel about this particular case. And are you sure it was on her platform? This is her space that they were having the conversation that we heard from your wife. That was her with her supporters, followers, or whatever, her group.
That was definitely her
friends.
That was definitely her. That's why she defended it when she took the screenshot and tried to say what Sippy Cup was referring to as lies. And like, she's not backing down from it. She's admitting to it, in a sense. And Sippy was the guy that we all just heard saying that. She's confirming that she was on that call.
Hiring Trump's ex-lawyer? I mean, and this is secondhand.
The question of the canceled rescue call is the thread this story is not done pulling. We are going to go deeper on the evidentiary record in the next video, specifically the timeline reconstruction and what maritime emergency protocol actually requires when a distress call is placed and then withdrawn. Because that protocol exists, it is documented, and it raises questions this case has not yet answered. Nolan Wells deserved answers. His family still does.
Let me, so people won't overlook it, Charles, and I think you're going to agree with me on this. We're talking about for the teenagers who were there or his friends, as well as Nolan Wells folks, Crumps, everyone. We're talking about everyone. Transparency would be beneficial to everyone.
If you have followed this case and you have found documentation the mainstream coverage has missed, put it in the comments with your source. That is how this record gets more complete.
I don't know if you've been watching the show, and maybe you've been on when I said these things, but I agree. Again, I agree with you 100%. I don't understand why they're not doing it, especially now when they see all of the things that are bubbling up. And then the DA came in. Look, I think the DA is a bit more transparent than the investigators. When the DA came in and said we won't be rushed, it's not going to be decided in the press or on social media, whatever it is. I'm paraphrasing what she said. Well, yeah. And one way to make sure that that doesn't happen is to be honest and to say, if you can't talk about something, say, we can't discuss that, or we don't know anything about that, or whatever it is. But you need to be out there saying, no, this thing is not true. We're not investigating this person for that. The threats that Miss Wansley Wells getting, it's beyond the pale. We don't have any information on any of that. You know what? It just knocks some of this shit down.
I'll also add that it shouldn't be up to the parents of Nolan Wells to have to issue subpoenas to get text messages and to get GPS records that were deleted. Again, this is akin to me, someone who's accused of drugs and they're throwing stuff out the car window or they're flushing stuff down the toilet while the police are raiding the house. It does not lend to the transparency and the integrity, and it shouldn't have to be a private citizen who has to do these things. This should be coming from a formal investigation. The fact that it's not is, again, very damning that there's something that's not right here, something that's trying to be hidden, and an innocent Black young person is dead.